So when I bought my building, one thing that I had Morton price out was the cost of insulating the inside of the building. Actually, that estimate also included putting up metal sheeting on all the walls, as well as insulating and putting metal sheeting on the ceiling. And I believe that price came to about $15,000. If I can find my old estimate, I might put the price up here, but I think it was about that to do the whole inside of the building. So I'm just going to pause here to comment on the error in my memory. Yeah, $30,000 is a lot more than the $15,000 that I thought it was. And once I saw that number in the estimate, that I remember that being a quick deciding factor of why I wasn't going to pursue the insulation. So, you know, if you're looking at a $100,000 building, an additional $30,000 to insulate and finish the interior walls, that was well beyond what I actually needed. Obviously, I want it to be insulated, but I just need a building to put something in. So that's a huge thing. And I remember thinking like, boy, what could I do, or how much could I get done for less if I did it myself? So that was a huge motivator to pursue this project as something that I would do rather than pay Morton to do. I can always do that later. That's a service that they provide at any time. So there was no rush for me to do that. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and hold off on insulating the inside of the building. And so that's what I had for a while, was no insulation. And talking with the gentleman that I did all my, purchasing through with Morton, he said that their office, at the end of any sort of build, they may end up with partial rolls or just rolls that weren't used from other projects. So as a fundraiser for company picnics or whatever, that they would sell those rolls to Morton customers. And so they had a couple rolls, and so for $100 a pop, he sold me, and I can't remember the initial number, but let's say it was like 5 or 6. And so I bought the rolls, they delivered them to my house, and then I, with some help from them, kind of having them kind of walk me through the steps, at least what they need to see, so if they come back in to do finishing work, that the insulation will be appropriate for that I was able to do that myself, or at least with a little bit of help of friends and family. So it's hard to give a breakdown on how much insulation or how many rolls it would take, because even in my experience, they had changed vendors for providing the rolls, and so they were in varying length, and I'll find out that information here and share it. So you're getting the leftovers from it, so there's no guarantee of what even a Morton office would have on hand. But most of them were the standard bay width, so kind of this 8-foot bay. I did end up with one short or a roll or narrow roll, and it turns out I have one narrow bay just because of the installation of my rear garage door, so I was able to use that. But I'm going to kind of show you at least some of the steps that were used to hang the insulation. And to be honest, this is a 2-person job. It's actually not bad. You'll need to rent a lift. I would even say that if you had shorter sidewalls, again, if these are 16-foot sidewalls, if you had something shorter, man, get a lift. I can't imagine trying to haul up, insulation with ladders and something and trying to hang it and do all the screwing. So get a lift. It's going to make the job a lot easier. So the first step was to kind of frame in the windows and the door that I had. So I basically just built a frame around it. It's not finished for a final project, but it allows me to kind of insulate against it. So I didn't take any video of actually doing that, but I do have a quick after photo, which isn't the best. But anyway, this is what the window looked like after I'd finished kind of boxing it in. And then the door, I did something similar as well. And so I wanted those things to be done, and that was relatively quick. And when I was able to move on to the insulation portion. So one more thing that we did before we started insulating or hanging the insulation was we put a 2x4, a pressure treated 2x4 across the bottom of each bay, and we screwed those into the concrete using, it was a Tapcon screws. So So that was pretty quick. And then when we hung the plastic later, we were able to attach that plastic to that to kind of give it a better seal. So after we got the insulation out of the plastic wrap, we would roll it out on the floor, and to help speed up the process of basically creating over and over again insulation rolls of the same length, we had used pieces of painter's tape on the floor to kind of mark where the cut would make or be made on the insulation roll, and then also where the 2x4 would go to be attached to the roll. So we didn't have to measure that out every time. So that was huge to kind of help speed up this process. So this really only works for the sidewalls where the height or the length of the insulation roll is uniform between all of them. So, but that's most of the building. The end walls didn't have nearly as many to do. So roll it out, cut it, and put on the 2x4 using a metal strip that I actually also got from Morton. So what the metal strip is basically just a bent piece of aluminum metal, and it has holes in it so that you can screw it to the 2x4, and it kind of has a rolled over top, I guess, so as to it won't cut into the insulation as it's kind of hanging there. So those pieces kind of came, they were actually already the set width that we needed for each of these bays, so we didn't have to do really much cutting. The cutting did happen on some of the shorter bays or some of the other little sections that we had to do. But we would just lay it on, screw into the board through this, and that was more than enough to really hold the insulation to the 2x4. So I did run out of these metal pieces because obviously Morton dropped off, like, let's say 6 rolls, and you may need 3 or 4 of these per roll, and they just kind of handed me what they had on hand. So I needed some more. So I contacted them when they were willing to swing by and drop off the others. They were actually doing a project not too far from my house, so they were able to quickly pop over and hand me those. So after we were done cutting as many lengths as we could out of one roll of insulation and then attaching it to the 2x4, we kind of had these set aside, and then we would move to using the scissor lift to lift each of them up into place and then screw it into the side of the building. So to help kind of hold it in place while we kind of positioned ourselves to put the screws in, we would kind of put a screw into the board or into the kind of the vertical beam, just so we could rest the 2x4 on that while we kind of positioned ourselves. Then all we had to do is lift it the 1 inch, maybe even less, to drive in our final screws. And actually, in my little demonstration here, we would actually also kind of pre-drill in the screws. So it was real quick. You'd put it up, rest it on the screw, and then quickly just lift it a little bit and drive the other screws into the vertical beam. So that was kind of the process that we repeated over and over again. We would unwrap a roll of insulation, cut as many pieces out of it, attach them to the 2x4s. Once those rolls were completed, we would then use the scissor lift and hoist up those that we've already finished. Then when we were done, rinse and repeat. Go get another roll and roll it out and do all that. So it really helped to have kind of the predetermined lengths identified or marked on the floor, so we didn't have to measure it every time. Again, this isn't, rocket science. This has to be absolute exact. So that really helped out. One thing that Morton also, and I was talking with some of the builders, that they wanted to have at least like a 1-foot overhang on the top of each of these pieces of insulation. And there was some reason why when they kind of finished it, like if they put in the roof and insulation, they wanted that there. So that was something else to include in our calculations was, the height of the sidewall plus that little bit to stick above each of the 2x4s that are attaching it to the top. So the end bays were similar with one key difference, and that is obviously the height of each bay was varied depending upon how close to the sidewalls that it was. So we would just take the scissor lift, drop a tape measure to measure the height of each of the bays that we needed to cut the insulation for.
And then one tricky part of that is we need to now mount the 2x4 that was holding up the insulation at the same angle and at the same height as the bottom of the trusses across the roof. So actually what you're doing is you're matching the top of the 2x4 that you're putting up to the bottom of all of the trusses. And the reason for this is you want to put across basically a top piece on this so that they can screw into those, the roof sheeting. And this way it's all the same height across the entire roof line, or I guess ceiling line. Is that the right word for that? So that took a little bit of measuring. One way that you can do it is to drag a string across all of the bottom of these joists to kind of line up where it's supposed to line up, I guess, on the side wall or the end wall. Or we ended up just actually measuring down. We were able to find some points on it and measure down where that lied. So we would hang up the side insulation as we always had done before, and then the last step was just to screw down a 2x4 across the whole width of that bay. So I'm not going to bore you with video of us hanging up the plastic, but you can get huge rolls of this stuff at any big box store, and we just ran it all the way around the building and just kind of stapled it down. And then one question that I had for the Morton folks is, where did they want these, the 2x4s that we had on the inside of the plastic so that they could mount the metal sheeting on it when I have the inside of the building finished? And to be honest, they didn't really seem to care. So what I did was I just matched the cross beams, if you will, that they had installed to mount the outside sheet metal, and I figured, well, if it worked on the outside, it should work on the inside. So we just kind of lined it up with that roughly and screwed those all the way around the inside of the building. So how much do I have invested in this so far? They were selling the rolls to me, and I can't remember. I think it was like $100 a roll, and it might have been a little bit more than that. But in total, again, because the varying lengths of these, we were probably able to do at least 3 bays per roll. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, depending upon the actual size of that. But in total, I think there were probably at least 10 to 12. So I'd say 12 would probably be a safe bet for the size of this building. And at $100 to $150 per roll, you're looking at a round off and say, let's call it just $2,000 in insulation for this. And then it took 3 days of rental on a lift. Actually, you know what? Let's make it 4 days of rental on a lift to do this. While it seemed relatively easy and just kind of repetitive of rolling it out and cutting it and attaching to the 2x4 and hanging it, my God, it was really surprising how long it took to hang all of this. We would spend a full day, and I think we got one entire side done, and then we had 3 more sides, but just having to spend a little more time doing the measurements for the end walls and then kind of working around the doors and the windows, and there's all these little things. It was at least a 4-day project with 2 people putting in basically a full 8-hour day to hang all of this. Obviously, we were learning as we went, and maybe we're better at the end, but plan on spending a couple days, unless you had a larger crew where several people can spend all of their time cutting and the other ones can quickly just kind of raise it up and put it in and the next roll is ready. That would probably help as well. So in total, I don't remember the exact amount of money I spent renting the scissor lift for those days, but in total, I'm probably in $4,000 to insulate this building up to this point. Plus or minus a little bit, because I didn't keep close eye on exactly what the total was over the course of a couple weeks that I did this. So anyway, it was a lot cheaper than the $30,000. Now, granted, the $30,000 included a lot more than that with doing the roof as well as some other stuff, but I think I got a huge chunk of it done. It doesn't actually help insulate the building because the whole roof is open, so it makes it a lot quieter because it doesn't echo as much, but it doesn't go really far to minimize excessive heat and cold in the winter. So while I'm happy with the progress, obviously I have a couple more steps to go before the building is going to be usable year round with that. And that's fine. It's at this point, I'm trying to just save a little bit of money and do what I can to finish it off. So I hope this helps somebody. I know that I spent some time looking, trying to find a video that showed how to do this. And honestly, it's really not hard. It's just, laborious. So best of luck to you if you try it yourself. And if you have any questions, feel free to, drop them in the comments here, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. Thanks for watching.